Dad left without a word. Years later, he reaches out, but what he really wants is shocking. So, I'm 17 now, but when I was 7, my dad just up and left. Like, no warning or anything. One day he was here, and the next day he wasn't. I remember my mom trying to explain it to me and my sister Emma. But how do you explain that to kids? She didn't really have an answer either. All she knew was that he had some issues with their relationship. I guess they were fighting a lot at the time, but to just vanish. That's the part that always bothered me. He didn't say goodbye or anything, just gone. For a long time, Mom didn't want to believe it was over. She would say stuff like, maybe he just needs time to figure things out, or he'll come back once he realizes what he's missing. And for a while, I think she actually believed it. She waited for 5 whole years before she finally filed for divorce. 5 years. I can't even imagine waiting that long for someone who didn't care enough to say goodbye. But that's the thing. He wasn't gone for her. I mean, physically, yeah, he wasn't around, but emotionally, it was like he never left. Mom was stuck on him, and so was Emma, my sister. Emma's 22 now, so she was 12 when he left. She remembered him way better than I did. She was always talking about him, asking Mom if she thought he'd come back. I think Emma felt like she had to keep the hope alive because if she didn't, it would be like admitting he didn't care about us. I'm not gonna lie, though. I don't really remember him much. I mean, I remember some things, like little bits and pieces. He used to read me bedtime stories, stuff like that, but it's all pretty fuzzy. It's weird, right? Like, how do you just forget someone who's supposed to be your dad? But that's what happens when someone isn't around for so long. They kind of fade away. You don't even realize it's happening until one day you're trying to picture their face and nothing. Just a blank. Anyway, fast forward to last week, and suddenly, out of nowhere, my dad texts my mom. Yeah, after all these years, he just decides to text her like it's no big deal. Like, hey, I know I've been gone for, 10 years, but let's catch up. I couldn't believe it when Mom told us. She was sitting at the kitchen table with this weird look on her face, and I thought something bad happened, like maybe she lost her job or something. But no, it was him. He wants to meet up, she said, looking between me and Emma. He wants to see us. Emma was immediately excited. I could tell by the way her face lit up. She was already talking about how she always knew he'd come back, how she couldn't wait to see him again. I just sat there, kind of numb. I didn't really know how to react. It wasn't like I'd been sitting around waiting for him to show up. I'd moved on. Or at least, I thought I had. Mom asked us if we wanted to go. Emma was all in, no surprise there. But I hesitated. I didn't really want to see him, to be honest. What was the point? It wasn't like seeing him was going to magically fix anything. He left us. He chose to walk away and never look back, so why should I bother? But then, I thought about Mom and Emma. I didn't want to be the one who ruined it for them. They obviously wanted this. I figured I could suck it up and go, even if it was just for them. So, we arranged to meet him at a diner in town. Real casual, nothing fancy. I didn't even bother dressing up or anything. I just threw on a hoodie and jeans because, honestly, I didn't care how I looked. I didn't care about impressing him. The day of the meetup, Emma was a nervous wreck. She kept fixing her hair and asking if she looked okay. Mom was kind of quiet, like she didn't really know how to feel about it all. I don't know. Numb is the best way to describe it. I wasn't excited, I wasn't nervous, I just felt nothing. We got to the diner early and grabbed a booth in the corner. Emma kept looking at the door, like she was counting down the seconds until he walked in. Mom was fidgeting with her napkin, folding and unfolding it over and over. I just stared out the window, trying not to think too much about what was going to happen. And then, he walked in. It was weird seeing him again. He looked older, obviously, but it was still him. Same face, same eyes. For a second, I thought maybe I'd feel something, like some kind of rush of emotions or whatever. But nope, nothing. It was like seeing a stranger. Mom and Emma immediately burst into tears. They stood up and hugged him like he'd been gone for a week, not 10 years. He hugged them back, and I could see tears in his eyes too. Then he looked at me. I stayed seated, not really knowing what to do. He came over and sat down across from me, smiling like we were old friends or something. Katie, he said, I've missed you so much. I just stared at him. What was I supposed to say to that? I didn't remember him. I didn't miss him. It felt like he was talking to someone else, not me. Don't you miss your dad? He asked, looking a little hurt. And that's when I just blurted it out. Honestly, I don't remember you. His face dropped. It was like he didn't know what to say. I think he expected me to run into his arms or something, like in the movies, but that wasn't going to happen. He left me when I was 7. I didn't know him anymore. The rest of the meetup was super awkward. He kept trying to make conversation, but it was clear he was shaken by what I said. I wasn't trying to be mean, I was just being honest. But I guess honesty isn't always what people want to hear. Eventually, he said he had to go, claiming he had work or something. I didn't buy it. He just didn't want to be there anymore. And honestly, I didn't care. I didn't want to be there either. When he left, I thought that would be the end of it, but oh no. Mom and Emma turned on me the second we got home. How could you say that to him? Mom snapped. Do you know how much this meant to your sister? Emma didn't say much, but I could tell she was upset. She had been waiting so long for this moment, and I guess I ruined it for her. But what did they expect me to do? Pretend like everything was fine, like he hadn't abandoned us. So, after we got back from meeting Dad at the diner, things immediately took a turn. I thought maybe, just maybe, my mom and Emma would understand where I was coming from. Like, I wasn't trying to be rude or anything, but I didn't see the point in pretending everything was fine. It wasn't fine. Not for me, at least. But instead of them seeing it my way, they went off on me the moment we walked through the door. I wasn't even fully inside the house before Mom started in. She turned around, looking at me like I'd done something unforgivable. How could you say that to him, Katie? She snapped, her voice all tight like she was trying not to scream. Do you have any idea what that did to him? Or your sister? I just stood there, not sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to apologize, but the other part, the bigger part, didn't. Why should I say sorry for telling the truth? I wasn't trying to hurt anyone's feelings, but I also wasn't going to pretend like I'd been missing him all these years. He was gone. It was that simple. Emma stayed quiet, which somehow made it worse. She wasn't usually the quiet type, and seeing her sitting there on the couch, all sad and quiet, was making me feel guilty, even though I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. I didn't say anything that wasn't true, I finally said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. I don't remember him. That's not my fault. Mom just shook her head, like she couldn't even believe what she was hearing. Katie, you could have at least tried. Emma has been waiting for this for years, and you ruined it. He came back and you ruined it. That last part stung. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. In fact, I went to that stupid diner for them, not for me. But they were acting like I was the bad guy, like I'd messed everything up on purpose. Emma still wasn't saying anything, and that just made me more frustrated. She was clearly upset, but instead of saying something, she just stared at the floor like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I knew she was disappointed. She had been talking about Dad nonstop since he reached out, saying how much she missed him and how this was the chance we'd been waiting for. But I wasn't waiting for him. Not like she was. I'd made peace with him being gone a long time ago. I didn't ruin anything, I said, a little more firmly this time. I didn't even want to go, but I did it for you two. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to lie. I don't remember him. That's the truth. Mom threw her hands up in the air like I'd just said the most ridiculous thing. You didn't even try, Katie. You just sat there like you didn't care, like none of this mattered. And then you told him you don't remember him? What were you thinking? I was thinking that I don't remember him, I shot back. What do you want me to say, Mom? Do you want me to pretend like I've been missing him all this time? Because I haven't. That's when Emma finally spoke up, and her voice was so small, so quiet, that it took me a second to realize she was even talking. I've been waiting for this, she said, not looking at me. For years, Katie. I've been waiting for him to come back, and you just didn't care. I sighed, feeling like I was stuck in this impossible situation. I didn't know how to make them understand how I felt without sounding like a complete jerk. It's not that I don't care, I tried to explain. It's different for me, Emma. You remember him. I don't. He's not my dad anymore, not really. But he is your dad, she said, finally looking up at me. Her eyes were red from crying, and I could tell how much this was hurting her. He's our dad, Katie, and now he's back, and you're acting like he doesn't even matter. He left, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He left us, Emma. For 10 years, he didn't care about us, and now he wants to come back like nothing happened? I'm sorry, but I can't just forget all that. Mom looked like she wanted to jump in again, but before she could, Emma stood up and walked past me, heading toward her room. She didn't say anything else, just left the room, and the sound of her bedroom door closing behind her felt louder than it actually was. I stood there, feeling awkward and guilty and frustrated all at once. I didn't know what to say to make things better, and part of me wasn't even sure I wanted to make things better. This wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that he left, and it wasn't my fault that they couldn't see that. But of course, Mom wasn't done. She turned to me, her eyes hard, and said, "You need to fix this, Katie. You need to talk to your father and apologize for what you said." I blinked, not believing what I was hearing. Apologize? For what? For telling the truth? For being selfish, she snapped. This wasn't just about you, Katie. This was about your sister, about your family. And you ruined it because you couldn't let go of your pride. That was it. I was done. Pride? Are you serious right now? I didn't ruin anything. He's the one who left, not me. And now you expect me to just, what? Welcome him back with open arms? No, that's not happening. You're acting like a child, Mom said, shaking her head again. You need to grow up and stop making this about you. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you make when you can't believe how ridiculous everything has gotten. I'm the one acting like a child? Really? He's the one who disappeared for 10 years, and I'm the one who needs to grow up? Mom didn't say anything. She just stood there, glaring at me like I was the biggest disappointment in the world. After a few seconds, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the living room, feeling like I was the only one who saw things for what they really were. I wanted to scream, or cry, or maybe both, but I didn't do either. I just stood there, staring at the spot where Mom had been, wondering how things had gotten so messed up. I didn't ruin anything. I knew that. But somehow, I was the one getting blamed for everything. It wasn't fair, but what else was new? So, after the whole blow-up between me, Mom, and Emma, things at home got super awkward. Like no one was talking to each other, and when they did, it was either short or filled with tension. I honestly thought maybe things would cool down after a couple of days, that they'd stop being mad at me for not pretending to be all happy about Dad coming back. But I was wrong. The weird silence just kept dragging on, and it was starting to drive me nuts. Then a few days later, Mom sat me and Emma down at the kitchen table. I could tell something was up because she had that serious mom face on, the one she used to wear when we were kids, and we were in trouble for something. I was just sitting there, waiting for her to say whatever it was, trying not to roll my eyes because I knew this was going to be another lecture about how I ruined everything. But it wasn't. Your dad, he's sick, she said, looking at both of us, but mainly at me. Her voice was calm, but I could tell by the way her hands were gripping the edge of the table that she was nervous. Emma's eyes went wide, and she immediately asked, "What do you mean sick? Like, how bad is it?" Mom took a deep breath, and that's when I knew this wasn't just some cold or whatever. His kidneys are failing, she explained. He's been on dialysis for a while now, but it's not enough. He needs a transplant. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. I could feel the room getting smaller and my stomach twisted up in knots. So this is what it was about. This is why Dad came back. Not because he missed us, not because he wanted to make up for the years he left us hanging. No, he came back because he needed something. He needed me. Emma was already halfway through her question before I could even wrap my head around everything. Can we help him? Is there something we can do? Mom nodded, and I saw her glance at me again. Emma's already been tested, she said softly, almost like she was afraid to say it out loud. But she's not a match. I felt my heart drop. I already knew what was coming next. I knew where this was going, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to be part of this. And you want me to get tested? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Mom nodded again. Yes. There's a chance you might be a match, Katie. We need to know. Emma turned to me, her eyes filled with hope. If you're a match, you could save him. You could save Dad. And just like that, it hit me. That was the whole reason behind this reunion, behind everything. He didn't come back because he missed us, or because he suddenly cared about being a father. He came back because he needed a kidney, and now I was supposed to be the one to fix everything. I didn't say anything for a long time. I couldn't. My brain was spinning in circles, trying to figure out how I felt about all of this. On one hand, I knew it wasn't Emma's fault or even Mom's. They genuinely wanted Dad back in their lives, and I knew they were just as caught up in this as I was. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being used, like I was some kind of backup plan for a guy who didn't bother to stick around when we needed him the most. Do you expect me to just give him my kidney? I asked finally, my voice sounding hollow even to me. He walked out on us, Mom. He didn't care about us for years, and now he's back because he needs something? And you expect me to just go along with it? Emma jumped in before Mom could respond. Katie, he's still our dad. I get that you're mad at him, but this is serious. If you're a match, you could save his life. I looked at her, trying to figure out how she could just brush everything aside like that. Like the last 10 years didn't happen, like him abandoning us didn't leave scars that still hadn't healed. But why should I? I asked, more to myself than to them. Why should I give him anything when he gave us nothing? Mom sighed, and for a second I thought she might actually see things from my side. But of course that didn't happen. I know it's hard, she said, leaning forward, trying to sound all understanding. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this isn't about the past anymore. This is about your father's life. If you can help him, then you should. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Should? I echoed, feeling my anger start to rise. I should help him? Why? Because he's my father? He gave up that right when he left us, Mom. He doesn't deserve this from me. Emma looked like she was on the verge of tears, and I could tell she wanted to say something, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of being the bad guy. I was tired of them acting like I was the problem when all I was doing was telling the truth. Mom reached out and put her hand on mine, but I pulled away. Katie, please, she said softly. Just think about it. That's all I'm asking. Just get tested. We don't know if you're even a match yet. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. No, I said firmly. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to get tested, and I'm not giving him my kidney. Emma's face crumpled, and she looked at me like I'd just slapped her. Katie, please, she whispered. He's our dad. I shook my head. No, Emma. He was your dad. Not mine. He stopped being mine a long time ago. With that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear them calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I needed to get away, to think, to figure out how I was supposed to deal with all of this. I didn't owe him anything. I didn't owe him my kidney, my forgiveness, or my time. But still, it hurt. It hurt to see Emma so upset, to see the hope in her eyes disappear because of me. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't just give in. And as much as I knew I was doing the right thing for myself, a part of me wondered if I'd ever stop feeling guilty about it. After that argument in the kitchen, things at home got a whole lot worse. If I thought it was tense before, now it felt like I was walking through a minefield every day. Mom wasn't speaking to me at all. I mean, nothing. She'd go out of her way to avoid me, like I wasn't even there. If she had to talk to me, it was just short, cold answers like yes or no. That hurt, I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't expecting a hug or anything, but the silent treatment from your own mom? Yeah, that stings. Emma, though? She was relentless. She wouldn't stop asking me to change my mind, to think about Dad and how he doesn't have much time left. Every time she'd start up, I'd tell her the same thing. I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to get tested. But it didn't matter. She'd come back a couple hours later, trying again, like she thought if she just pushed hard enough, I'd finally cave. It was wearing me down. I'll be real with you. It's not like I was enjoying this whole situation. Seeing my sister upset, seeing my mom act like I was some monster, it sucked. But the thing was, I didn't trust him. I didn't trust that the only reason he came back was because he needed something. That just felt wrong to me. It was like, what happens after he gets what he wants? Does he disappear again? Go back to wherever he's been hiding for the last 10 years? How am I supposed to just ignore that? One night, after another round of Emma's pleading, I just snapped. Why are you so set on this? I asked, my voice louder than I meant it to be. Why are you the one acting like he's some hero that we need to save? He left us, Emma. He didn't care about us for a decade, and now because he needs a kidney, he's back? How's that okay with you? Emma looked at me, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes again. I hated making her cry, but I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. Because he's still our dad, Katie, she said, her voice shaky. I know he left. I know he hurt us, but he's still our dad. He's sick, and if you can help him, why wouldn't you? I threw my hands up in frustration. Because it's not that simple. I don't owe him anything. Just because he's sick doesn't erase everything he did to us. Emma wiped at her eyes, sniffing. But don't you want to be the bigger person? Don't you want to give him another chance? That hit a nerve. Why is it always on me to be the bigger person? I shot back. Why do I have to be the one to forgive and forget? What about him, Emma? What has he done to make this right? She didn't have an answer to that. She just shook her head and walked away, mumbling something about how I was being selfish. And that's how it always went. Every time we talked, it ended the same way. Me standing there trying to explain why I couldn't do it, and Emma looking at me like I was the worst person in the world. Things didn't get any better with Mom either. I overheard her on the phone one day talking to one of her friends, saying how disappointed she was in me. I never thought Katie would be this cold, she said, like I wasn't in the next room hearing every word. How could she turn her back on her own father like that? I wanted to scream. I wanted to march in there and ask her where this sudden loyalty to Dad was coming from. Where was this when he left us? Where was this when she was crying herself to sleep at night, wondering why he didn't love us enough to stay? But I didn't say anything. I just went back to my room and tried to block it all out. The worst part? The guilt. No matter how much I stood my ground, that little voice in the back of my head kept nagging at me, making me question if I was doing the right thing. What if Emma and Mom were right? What if I was being selfish? What if I was making a huge mistake? It was like this constant weight on my shoulders, and I couldn't shake it no matter how hard I tried. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I found myself scrolling through my phone, reading all these articles and stories about organ donation. There were so many stories about people who had saved their family members' lives and how they said it was the best decision they'd ever made. I could feel the pressure building as I read them, like I was supposed to feel inspired, like I was supposed to suddenly have this change of heart and rush out to get tested. But every time I tried to picture myself doing it, I just couldn't. It didn't feel right. It wasn't about being selfish. It was about knowing where I stood, knowing what I was willing to give. And this was something I couldn't give. Not to him. The next morning, Emma tried again. She sat at the kitchen table with me, holding her coffee, looking at me with those sad eyes of hers. "I know you're scared, Katie," she said softly. "I know this is a lot to ask, but you have to understand. This is his life. This is Dad's life we're talking about." I put down my spoon and sighed, rubbing my temples. "I'm not scared, Emma. I'm angry. I'm angry that he thinks he can just show up and ask for something like this, after everything he's done. It's not fair." She reached out and grabbed my hand. "I get it, I really do. But sometimes it's not about what's fair. Sometimes it's about doing what's right." I pulled my hand back and shook my head. "No. Doing what's right is about standing up for yourself too. And I'm not going to let him use me like this. I'm not getting tested. And that's final." She looked down at her coffee, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I don't want to lose him again," she whispered. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. I knew she missed him. I knew she wanted her dad back. But the thing was, the dad she wanted didn't exist anymore. He was gone the day he left us, and nothing was going to bring him back. "I'm sorry, Emma," I said quietly, "but I can't do it." She didn't say anything after that. She just sat there, staring at her coffee, and I could feel the distance between us growing wider with every second that passed. After that last conversation with Emma, things just got quieter around the house. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, though. It was more like this heavy silence, like everyone was tiptoeing around each other, waiting for the next explosion. Mom was still giving me the cold shoulder, and Emma wasn't crying anymore, but she'd look at me with this sad, disappointed expression that honestly hurt way more than if she had just yelled at me. It felt like I was walking around with this giant weight on my chest all the time. I didn't feel comfortable in my own house anymore. I'd avoid being in the same room as them for too long, mostly sticking to my bedroom or leaving the house just to get some air. Even just sitting in the living room felt awkward, like I didn't belong there. And then it all came to a head one evening. It was late, probably around 9 p.m., and I was in my room minding my own business, when I heard Mom's voice downstairs. She was on the phone, and she wasn't bothering to keep her voice down. I couldn't make out everything she was saying, but I heard bits and pieces that made my stomach drop. Stuff like, "I don't know what's wrong with her," and "She's not the same kid I raised." I tried to tune it out, but it was impossible. Every word she said felt like a stab in the gut. It wasn't just disappointment in her voice, it was frustration. Like she was genuinely angry with me for not doing what she wanted. And for the first time, it really hit me how deep this whole thing had gone. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. They were really truly upset with me. And I didn't know if that was something we could ever fix. I stayed in my room, hoping the phone call would end soon. But instead, things got worse. About 10 minutes later, I heard Mom call for me from downstairs. "Katie, can you come here for a second?" I froze. I had a bad feeling about this. Normally, I would have just gone down and dealt with it, but something about her voice made me hesitate. She didn't sound mad, but she didn't sound normal either. There was something off in her tone, like she was trying to be calm but was barely holding it together. I dragged myself downstairs, trying to brace for whatever was coming next. When I got to the kitchen, I saw Mom sitting at the table, her phone on the counter next to her. Emma wasn't there, which was weird, because she usually backed Mom up during these kinds of talks. It was just me and her. "Katie, sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I sat down, already feeling my palms getting sweaty. I knew this wasn't going to be good. Mom took a deep breath before she started. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's been happening," she began, her voice quiet but serious. "And I need you to understand something. This situation with your dad, it's not just about you." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. It's not just about your feelings, she continued. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry, but this is bigger than that. Your dad is dying, Katie. He doesn't have time for grudges. Her words hit me like a brick. It was the first time she had said it so plainly. Dying. There it was, laid out in front of me with no sugarcoating. And as much as I had tried to keep my guard up, those words made me flinch. I get that you're upset, Mom went on, her eyes locked on mine. I get that, but we can't afford to be selfish right now. We can't afford to hold on to the past when someone's life is at stake. Your sister and I, we're doing everything we can to make this right, and we need you to be a part of that. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands clenching into fists on my lap. I'm not being selfish, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I can't do this, Mom. I can't be the one to fix everything. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to keep calm. This isn't about fixing everything, Katie. It's about giving him a chance. Giving us all a chance. Your sister's been through hell with this, and so have I. We've lost so much time already, and now we're running out of it. I swallowed hard, trying to fight back the frustration that was building up again. Why is it always on me, though? I asked, my voice shaking a little. Why do I have to be the one to do this? I didn't ask for any of this. I know, Mom said, and for a second I saw something soften in her expression. I know you didn't ask for this, but sometimes we don't get to choose what we're asked to do. Sometimes life just happens, and right now, you have the power to save him. I shook my head, tears starting to well up in my eyes. But he didn't care about us for years, Mom. Why does that not matter to you? Why doesn't it matter that he walked out and left us to pick up the pieces? It does matter, she said, her voice cracking just a little. It matters more than you know. But holding on to that anger won't change anything. It won't bring back the time we lost. The only thing we can do now is move forward. There was a long pause as we both sat there, the weight of her words hanging between us. I didn't know what to say anymore. Part of me wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that I shouldn't have to be the one to make this decision. But the other part of me felt so small, so tired, like I was being crushed by the pressure of it all. I need you to think about this, Katie, Mom said softly. Really think about it. Don't do it for him. Do it for us, for your sister, for your family. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I didn't want to cry in front of her. I didn't want her to see how torn up I was inside, but I couldn't hold it back anymore. I'll think about it, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Mom nodded, standing up from the table. That's all I'm asking, she said, giving me a small, sad smile. Just think about it. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty chair across from me, my mind racing in circles. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was strong enough to keep saying no. But one thing was for sure. This was breaking me piece by piece, and I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. After that talk with Mom, I felt like my head was spinning nonstop. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I didn't want to think about it at all. I was tired of thinking about it, tired of the guilt, the pressure, the feeling that I had to be the one to fix everything. I just wanted it all to go away, but no matter what, it was always there. I couldn't escape it. Emma stopped bugging me, which I guess was a relief, but it also made everything feel heavier somehow. Like the silence was just building up and waiting for me to make some big decision. Mom wasn't bringing it up anymore either, but I knew she was still hoping I'd come around. I could see it in the way she'd look at me, like she was waiting for me to just stand up one day and say, "Okay, I'll do it." But I didn't. I kept telling myself that I wasn't going to let them guilt me into anything. I wasn't going to let Dad's sudden return mess with my head. But I couldn't ignore the weight of it, the thought that this was a life or death situation. It wasn't as simple as just saying no and walking away. Every time I said no, I felt like I was being pushed closer to this invisible line where I'd either have to commit to my decision or cave under the pressure, and I didn't know what was worse. One night I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard a knock on my door. It was Emma. She opened the door a crack and peeked in, her face still puffy from all the crying she'd done lately. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded, sitting up as she slipped into the room and sat on the edge of my bed. She didn't say anything for a while, and I didn't push her to talk. I could tell she was still hurting, and in a way, I guess I was too. "I know I've been hard on you," she finally said, her voice breaking a little. I don't know how to deal with all this. I don't know how to lose him again. Her words hit me hard, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to lose Emma either. I hated seeing her like this, torn between wanting to protect our dad and knowing how much he hurt us. I'm scared, I admitted, my own voice quiet. I'm scared that if I do this, I'll regret it, and if I don't, I'll regret it too. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. I get it. I do. It's not fair that you have to make this choice. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm not going to hate you for it. I can't. Her words were the first bit of relief I'd felt in what felt like forever. I didn't have an answer for her, not yet, but just knowing that Emma wasn't holding everything against me took a tiny bit of the weight off my shoulders. I'm sorry, I whispered, and she just nodded, her eyes red and tired. We didn't say much after that. She just sat with me for a while before getting up to leave. As she walked out of my room, I realized that no matter what decision I made, things were never going to go back to the way they were before. This was going to change everything and there was no way around it. But for now, all I could do was take it one day at a time. Last update. So after weeks of back and forth and a lot of sleepless nights, I finally decided to get the test. I couldn't take the pressure anymore, and a part of me thought that maybe this was the only way to put an end to everything. If I got tested, at least we'd know for sure. So I told Mom and Emma, and for the first time in a while, they actually seemed hopeful. The test itself was quick, just some blood work and questions from the doctor. But the waiting afterward? That was brutal. Every day felt like a month, with the three of us tiptoeing around each other, trying to act normal when everything was anything but. Emma kept looking at me with this hopeful expression, like she was clinging to the idea that maybe I'd be the answer to all our problems. Mom wasn't much better, pretending she wasn't nervous when she clearly was. Then the results came back. I wasn't a match. I can't even describe the relief that washed over me when I heard those words. It was like this huge weight had been lifted off my chest, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't going to have to make that impossible choice after all. But my relief lasted about 2 seconds because when I looked over at Mom and Emma, I saw the devastation on their faces. Emma just broke down crying right there in the doctor's office. She tried to hold it together, but the tears kept coming. Mom wrapped her arms around her, and they both looked so defeated. It hurt to see them like that, knowing they had put all their hope into something that wasn't going to happen. It broke my heart to see them fall apart like that. But at the same time, I knew there was nothing more I could do. We drove home in silence, and I spent the next few days trying to give them space. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying not to make things worse, but also feeling like I couldn't do anything to make it better. They never blamed me for not being a match, but the sadness in their eyes every time they looked at me made me feel like I'd let them down in some way. 7 months later, Dad passed away. It wasn't a shock. He'd been in and out of the hospital, getting weaker with every visit. Still, when the call came, it was like everything just stopped for a moment. Even though I wasn't close to him, there was this strange emptiness, like the final chapter of a story that never really made sense had finally closed. Emma took it the hardest. She shut down for a while, barely leaving her room. It was tough to watch, especially knowing how much she had hoped for a different ending. Mom tried to be strong for both of us, but I could see the cracks. They had put so much faith into the idea that maybe, somehow, we could save him. And when that didn't happen, it felt like all that hope turned into something heavy that we all had to carry. I tried to be there for Emma as much as I could. I wasn't great at it, but I listened when she needed to talk, sat with her when she needed silence. It took time, but eventually she started to come back to herself. The grief never fully went away, but it softened, like an old bruise that doesn't hurt as much anymore. Now, looking back, I know I made the right decision, even though it hurt like hell to see what it did to them. I couldn't have given him my kidney even if I wanted to, but taking that test showed them that I tried. It showed them that I was willing to do what I could, and that's all I could offer. They can't blame me for how things turned out, and I can't blame myself either. And as for Emma, she's doing better now. She's starting to smile again, and it's not as forced as it used to be. We're all still figuring out how to move forward, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like we might actually be able to